Hi, I'm Tamara from mooglyblog.com, and in this video, I'm going to be demonstrating how to crochet the split cuff slippers, which are a free pattern you'll find on mooglyblog.com in women's and men's sizes in both standard and wide width. To find these, simply go to the link in the description or type Moogly split cuff slippers into your favorite search engine. Let's get started. To make this pattern, I used a USI 5.5 millimeter crochet hook. This one is by Furls. I also used Peyton's Classic Wool Worsted yarn, and I found that I needed 2 skeins to make the slippers, plus a little bit extra of the green to make the optional little tab strap that you can see here. That part is purely decorative, so if you only have the main color, that's fine too. I also recommend that you always have some stitch markers handy. Let's go ahead and take a closer look at the split cuff slippers. Here you can see the finished split cuff slippers, and you can see why they got their name. It's actually a tall fold-over cuff. The ribbed portion goes all the way around the ankle to keep it nice and warm. Then we flip over this part, which is purely decorative, but it gives it a nice finished touch. It also gives us the opportunity to add this optional strap here and button. These are purely decorative, but they help me tell right from left, because otherwise there's no difference. What you will find with this pattern is a wide range of sizes, all the way from a women's 4 up to a men's 14. You can also make these slippers wide width by jumping up a size for the stitch count. So, for example, I wear a size women's 10 in wide width. So I make the length for a size 10, and I make the width for the next size up to give me that wide width feel and fit. You can, of course, play with this pattern and adjust your slippers to fit you. These are very easy to try on as you go because we start at the toe, work our way back, then we make the cuff, and finally we finish it up by adding just a little seam right here to the back of the heel. Let's go ahead and get started making our split cuff slippers. So here within the pattern, you'll find all the instructions you need for your custom sizing for your slippers. So first you'll look for the size you wear, and you'll see we start with women's 4 to 6.5, and then as we go up, you can see women's 7 to 9.5 is the same as men's 6 to 8.5. So you can find your size and then find your width, and it will tell you, for example, let's say you wear women's size 9 in standard width. Then you would follow the size medium instructions for both stitch count and row count. On the other hand, if you wore a women's size 10 wide width, or maybe a men's size 10 wide width, you'd follow the size extra large instructions for the stitch count, but then drop down to the size large instructions for the row count. The stitch count will give us our width, and the row count will give us our length. So you can find customization instructions right here inside the pattern. All the sizes of the split cuff slippers start exactly the same. With row 1 and color A, we make a magic circle. So I go over the first finger of my non-hook hand twice towards me. A lot of words for this motion. 1 and 2. Then I'm going to hold on to the working yarn and that tail end so that I can take my hook, insert it under both of those loops, grab the one closest to my hand and pull it just under the one closest to my fingertip. There we go. Yarn over and pull a loop through. From here, I can start crocheting into the magic ring, and with each stitch, I'll make sure that I go into the circle and that I catch that tail end because that's the magic part that lets us close it up. Now I want to begin round 1 with a chainless starting double crochet. If you prefer, you can simply start with a chain 3 or a stacked single crochet, whichever you prefer. To make my chainless starting double crochet, I'm going to go ahead and pull my loop up to the height of a double crochet, secure the top of the loop on the hook with my finger, yarn over with the hook itself, insert my hook into the loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, there we go, and then yarn over, finally release the top of that loop, and pull through those last 2 loops. There we go. I do have a separate tutorial for this stitch on my YouTube channel if you'd like to take a closer look at it. And it's how I tend to start all my rounds for this pattern, and my rows as well, at least the ones that involve a double crochet. So now that I've put a stitch marker in the top of my first stitch there, I'm going to continue to stitch into my circle. But as I said, I want to make sure I go into that ring and catch that tail end as well. We need a total of 12 double crochets in this ring, so I will keep making double crochets until we have a total of 12 including that very first stitch, or if you used a chain 3, including the chain 3. So after you've made your 12 double crochets, you can go ahead and pull on that tail to close up the ring. Now, the last thing we need to do is join with a slip stitch, but before I do that, I do want to take a second stitch marker and put it right in that last stitch. A lot of this pattern is worked in turned rounds or joined rows. Some people like to call them different things, but basically it means we're going to join with a slip stitch and then turn to work back from the other side on round 2. We're going to be flipping back and forth like this. So it's really important to put a stitch marker in the first and last stitch of each row so that we don't end up accidentally working into the slip stitch. And you'll see what that looks like here in just a second. So with the slip stitch in there, now we're ready to turn and make round 2. And you can see when I turn my work, we're going to be working into that stitch right there, not the slip stitch. So that's why having that stitch marker there is so handy. So for round 2, we're going to be working 2 double crochets in each stitch around. So for the first stitch, again, you can either chain 3 or do a stacked single crochet. I'm going to go ahead and do another chainless starting double crochet. I pull up my loop, secure the top, yarn over with the loop itself. I'll go right into that first marked stitch there, yarn over and pull up my loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2 to finish the stitch. Now I will go ahead and move this stitch marker right on up to the top of the stitch I just made. There we go. So now I can go ahead and put a second double crochet right in that stitch. And then we can continue around putting 2 double crochets in each stitch for a total of 24 double crochets in all sizes. So here you can see I have finished round 2, and I've joined with a slip stitch and I've moved that last stitch marker up to that last double crochet. But now you're going to need to refer to your written pattern for round 3. So there are different instructions depending on what size you're making that you'll follow for round 3. Then everybody goes on to round 4. So round 3 is really where we set the width of the foot. It doesn't have any other changes depending on size after that, except for the number of rows. Again, remember the number of stitches is what determines the width, and the number of rows is what determines the length. So depending on what size you're making, you can refer to your chart and see how you are to make round 3. For the purposes of demonstration today, I'll go ahead and go with the smallest size. We work our chainless starting double crochet or chain 3 in the first stitch, double crochet in the next 10 stitches, then we work 2 double crochets in the next, that's our increase, double crochet 11, 2 in the next. So we increase by 2 stitches. As you can see, in the medium size, we increase by a couple more in large, and a couple more after that in extra large. So really the only difference is how often we're working those increases. So for round 3, we'll do basically the same thing we did in round 2, but we'll be working even for the most part with only those specific increases for your size. So here you can see I have finished round 3, and you can see that we're already starting to get sort of that cup shape to fit up around the toe. So we're right on track. Now we're ready to continue with round 4, and rounds 4 through 10, 11, 12, or 13 will give us the length from the toe to right in front of the ankle. So for these rounds, we're simply working even. But you'll want to make sure to remember to turn at the end of each round. So we're still turning at the end of each round after we do the join, but we're only working even, no increases for the next few rounds. So here I have worked just a couple more rows, but for the sake of demonstration, we're going to move on into the pattern. The next section is labeled Make the Heel of the Foot. So at this point, you've worked from the toe back to right in front of the ankle, and now we need to stop working in rounds so that we can work around the bottom of the heel on back to the back of the heel. So to make the heel of the foot, we begin working in rows. And for row 1, we work our chainless starting double crochet in the first stitch. But I still need to remember to turn my work. There we go. So depending on what size you're making, you may have ended on a right size side or a wrong side row. It doesn't really matter. It'll all work out in the end. Just make sure you turn here as you begin your first row of the heel. So I'm going to go ahead and move that stitch marker on up. And then we need to look at our instructions for our size again. Depending on what size we're making, We'll double crochet in the next 19, 20, 22, or 23 stitches, leaving the rest unworked. The stitches that we're not going to crochet into are the ones that essentially where our ankle goes. We're creating our foot opening. So for this round and for the next several rounds, depending again on what size you're making, we're just working back and forth in rows. We're not increasing, but we're leaving that center section right at the top of the foot there unworked so that we have an opening for our foot to go into later. So again, you'll want to refer to the written instructions here. You can see right down here, make the heel of the foot. You'll see how many stitches to make for your size and how many rows to make for your size. So here you can see I've worked several rows for our strange little slipper here. And you can see it is really starting to take on that slipper shape. So now we're ready to set up for the cuff. We're going to pretend this is exactly the size for this strange little foot we're making this slipper for. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to go ahead and fold that last row in half, or go back to considering it a round, if you will. We want to slip stitch in the first stitch we made of the round. So we can just bring our hook right over here and slip stitch right in there. Now, at this point, we're ready to start making the cuff. So we're going to sort of turn our work this way so we can start crocheting around this foot opening. You can see right back here, this is left unseamed. This is the one little seam that we'll sew up when we finish our slipper. So right now, this just sits as is, and we start crocheting our cuff right around this top foot opening. So now we're ready to start making the inner cuff of our slipper. And from here on out, we're going to follow the same instructions for all sizes. So for round one, we start again with our chainless starting double crochet and then a double crochet in the side of the first row. So we've got a lot going on here. Let's kind of get our stuff straightened out. I'm going to get that stitch marker out of the way over there. And we want to look at our work. So we're going to be crocheting around this foot opening right here. So this right here, this last row that we made, is where we're going to be working those first two stitches into. And because we're working evenly into the sides of rows here, that means we want to put that first stitch sort of in the top half of the stitch and the second stitch in the bottom half of the stitch. Let's go ahead and do that together. So I'm going to go ahead and make my chainless starting double crochet. Again, you can do a chain 3 if you prefer, or a stacked single crochet. And I'm going to put my hook right in the top half, and you can see right there, of that stitch. Just like if we were working along the edge of a blanket. If you've done that before, you can do this. We're going to yarn over and finish that double crochet. I'm just going to go ahead and leave those stitch markers where they are and bring in a new one here. There we go. Get through there. There we go. And now what we want to do is work a second double crochet in the bottom half of that stitch, just to give us some nice spacing. Even though this is pretty much going to get covered up by the fold over cuff, we still want it to look nice, right? So we've got our chainless starting double crochet and double crochet rather, worked into the side of that first row. So now we're going to continue working 2 double crochets in the side of each row until we get up here to our toe, and then we can just work 1 stitch in each stitch. So double crochets all the way around, worked evenly. So let's go ahead and work a bit of this together. I'm going to come right to the next row here, put a double crochet, and I just go right in and split that stitch itself, or the chainless starting double crochet. If you've got a chain 3 there, you can work into those chains. Just try and spread your stitches down the length of the double crochet. And again, if it's not perfect, with the split cuff slippers, you'll be covering all that up with the fold over cuff anyway. So very approachable, even if you're a beginner. All right, you can see here, this is where it can get a little tricky. We need to look at our work, and this is one of the reasons I left those stitch markers hanging out there. We can see there's one more row here. So we go ahead and put a double crochet on the top half, and as best we can, get a double crochet there in the bottom half. And now we're going to jump right to crocheting in those stitches. So I'm going to go right into that stitch there. I'm going to move that stitch marker out of the way. I'm done with that for now. And then double crochet in each of these stitches across the toe. The number that you have will differ, of course, depending on what size you're making. So we're almost across here. Oop. Dropped my whole hook out of the stitch there. If that happens to you, or if you need to take it out on purpose, Always make sure that when you put your hook back in the loop, the portion of the loop that moves when you pull back down on the working yarn is in front of your hook. And that will help you make sure your loops don't get twisted. So I just wanted to get over here a little bit so you can see. I'm just going to double crochet in each stitch, and then if we look closely, pull it up here, we can see that's the last stitch. You can see that stitch is worked into the next stitch, so that means that's the stitch we need to work into the side of to come up the other side. So now I'm going to put one in the bottom half of that stitch, followed by the top half of that stitch. Now, when you get to the end of this round, and you've worked all the way around back here to the heel, then you'll need to take a moment and count your stitches. If you have made an even number of stitches in this round, then you can go ahead and join and continue on with round 2. If, just the way your stitch counts worked out, and with customizing slippers to fit, it can absolutely happen. If you ended up with an odd number of stitches, then we're just going to add an extra one back here at the heel. It's an easy fix. You don't have to go back and try and dissect what you did. We'll just add an extra stitch to this last row. So you can see I'm almost there. While I've been yammering away at you here, we've got that one last row right here that we can work into the side of. We want to put 2 stitches in there, and then we'll go back and count and see if we need to add a third. Or if you've tried your slippers on and they feel a little loose, you could take one out. But I prefer to add one just to have a little bit more flexibility. So I'm just going to go ahead now and count and see how many stitches did we end up with here on our strange little sample. Could have been any number. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. I've got an even number, so I can go ahead and just join with a slip stitch to that first stitch. If I'd had an odd number, I would just go ahead and add another double crochet right there. But with our even number, we can go ahead and join with a slip stitch. Now, the other thing that's different about the inner cuff here and the outer cuff is that for the inner cuff, where we're still working here in rounds, we are no longer going to be turning. So the inner cuff is all worked from the right side or the outside of the slipper like so. So we don't have to turn again. Now we can go ahead. I should have marked that last stitch. Even though we're not turning, it's always a good idea to put a stitch marker there in that last stitch so you don't accidentally work in the slip knot. Or excuse me, in the slip stitch. But now we're ready for round 2 of our inner cuff. To make rounds 2 through 4 of our inner cuff, it's all the same. We start with the chain 1, and we're going to work a front post double crochet around the first stitch. So let's go ahead and get this stitch marker out of the way. There we go. To make a front post double crochet, we're not going to go into the top of the stitch. We're going to go around the post of the stitch itself. You can see this is the stitch we joined to, so this is the stitch we want to work around. I've got my yarn over on my hook, and I'm going to insert my hook from the front around the post until it comes back out to the front of the fabric. And I can yarn over and pull that loop of yarn all the way behind that post and up to the front. We've got 3 loops left on our hook, and we can finish our double crochet just as we normally would. Yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. Now this is the first stitch of our round, so I'm going to move my stitch marker right into it. There we go. That particular stitch marker, I think, has a little snag on it. It keeps grabbing my yarn. All right, so we've got our front post double crochet around our first stitch. Then we're going to back post double crochet around the next stitch. So let's look at our work again. We can see we worked around this one. Here is the next stitch. We're going to yarn over, and because it's a back post double crochet, we're going to come from behind our work around that post until the hook pops back out to the back of our work. We're going to yarn over, and we want to pull this loop all the way through and up behind that stitch so we can get all 3 of those loops free and clear. Then we yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. So that's a front post double crochet followed by a back post double crochet. And that's going to be our repeat all around. So let's do a couple more of those together here after I pull up some more yarn. There we go. All right, so let's go back to our work. This is the next stitch. So now it's going to be a front post double crochet. We yarn over, come from the front around that post, pop up again on the other side, yarn over and pull up our loop. finish our double crochet as usual. Yarn over again. Now it's a back post double crochet. We come from behind, around that post, yarn over and pull up our loop, and finish our double crochet. So just continue alternating front post and back post double crochet all the way around. So here I have finished round 2, and you can see we're getting some great ribbing action there around our cuff. So we just repeat round 2 for rounds 3 and 4, just like exactly what we just did. Then we move on to round 5, where we're going to do a little bit of decreasing to pull our cuff in just a little bit tighter. So for this one, we start again with a chain 1, and once again, we're going to work our front post, back post pattern around for a set number of stitches, depending on what size you're making. So it could be 3 times if you're making the small, 6 times if you're making the large. Again, you'll need to refer to the written instructions for your size. But we're going to, for this size small I'm making here, which admittedly doesn't have even as many stitches as a size small because I made the foot length a bit shorter, we're just going to do a couple of repeats. So there's our front post double crochet, followed by a back post double crochet. And let's do a couple more. Front post double crochet, back post double crochet. So as I say, depending on the size you're making, you'll have a different number of stitches you worked before you work your decrease. And we're going to have a couple of decreases in this round. So to make the decrease over these really cool post stitches, we're going to work a front post, back post, double crochet 2 together. And we're going to do that twice on this side and twice again on that side. So again, follow the written instructions. So let's make a front post, back post, double crochet 2 together. I'm going to yarn over and look for the next stitch. You can see here it's a front post stitch. So we're going to go around it like a front post stitch, yarn over and pull up our loop, and yarn over and pull through 2, and stop with 2 loops left on the hook. Then I'll yarn over again to prep for the second half. We look for the next stitch. It's a back post stitch. You can see how it's sort of sitting behind the stitch below it. So we're going to come at it as a back post stitch from behind around the post, yarn over and pull up our loop. Now we've got 4 loops on the hook. We yarn over and pull through 2, and then finally to finish the stitch, we yarn over and pull through all 3. So that's a front post, back post 2 together, double crochet 2 together specifically. Let's do it again. We yarn over, go to the next stitch. It's a front post stitch. Yarn over and pull up our loop. Yarn over and pull through 2. Yarn over, look for the next stitch. It's a back post stitch. So we come from behind, go around that post. Yarn over and pull up our loop. Yarn over and pull through 2. And then finish by yarning over and pulling through all 3. Then we go back to standard front post and back post double crochets until we do a couple more decreases on the other side. And that's how we work round 5. So in round 5, you should have had a total of 4 of those decreases. So you can see that brings our cuff in significantly. Now, going back to the written pattern, round 6 is just the same thing we did in round 2, working evenly front post and back post double crochets all the way around. Round 7 is just like the round we just did. Round 5, where we have 4 total decreases. We do the front post, back post, double crochet 2 together, twice on each side. Then we finish up the inner cuff with one more round, just like round 2, where we front post and back post evenly all the way around. So for the inner cuff, we've been working from the right side or outside of our slipper this whole time for these last few rounds. But for the outer cuff, which we're now going to go ahead and demonstrate, we are going to turn our work. So this may feel a little strange, but we're just going to turn and basically work from the inside of the cuff for row 1. And indeed, for the outer cuff, we're going to start working in rows. We're not going to join when we get to the end. We'll just go back and forth. So this first one here is worked from the inside of the cuff, and we're going to be working in the back loop only for this entire round. So let's talk for just a moment about what that means. Let's come down here so it's a little easier to see. You can see there are 2 loops at the top of each stitch. If we turn them this way, they sort of look like nested V's. The loop that's closest to us is always the front loop. The loop that's furthest away from us is the back loop, and it's always relative to us, the crocheter. So now this is the front loop, and this is the back loop, but if I'm looking at it from this direction, now this is the front loop, and this is the back loop. So for this round, we want to work under just the back loop of each stitch. So I'm going to get myself straightened out here again so I can make sure my loop is on my hook correctly, and it wasn't. There we go. So now we can turn and get ourselves set up so we can approach that first stitch from the right angle. And for this one, I'm going to start again with a chainless starting double crochet. So I'm going to pull that loop up high, secure the top of it, yarn over, and now I want to look for that stitch marker right there, and I want to go under just that back loop. Yarn over and pull up my loop, yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2 to finish. I can go ahead and grab that stitch marker and move it right up to that stitch. There we go. Now, what we're going to do is continue to work double crochets in the back loop only all the way around until we get to that very last stitch. No increases, no decreases, but also do not join when you get to the end. And remember, back loop only. Just insert your hook right between those 2 loops so you can pick up just the back loop of each stitch. So here you can see I have finished row 1 of the outer cuff, and we worked in just that back loop. What this is going to do is that when we go to fold this cuff over, that unused loop helps create a really nice line at the top and helps encourage the cuff eventually to fold over a little bit better. Right now it really wants to stand up though, so we'll go ahead and let it stand up. For rows 2 through 7 of the outer cuff, again, the same for all the sizes that we're making, we simply double crochet in each stitch across. Now, we don't have to go back to working in the back loop only. From here on out, we can work under both of those front loops, at least until we get down to row 8. So, once again, I'm going to start with my chainless starting double crochet. You can use whichever stitch you like, a chain 3, a stacked single crochet, whatever works for you, and then simply double crochet in each stitch across for the next several rows. So after you've made 7 rows of your outer cuff, then it's time for row 8. We're going to start with a chain 1 and a single crochet in the first stitch. There we go. And now we go back to our pattern and see that we're going to be working the rest of this round as half double crochets worked in the front third loop. So what does that mean? It means we need to take another look at the stitches we just made. So you can see right here is a double crochet. And if you look closely, we have our 2 loops at the top, and right underneath those loops, right here in the back, there is another loop right there. That's created by the yarn over. What we want to do is work under that loop. So we always want to work our stitches working away from us. So we're going to go basically from underneath up under that loop for a half double crochet. So I'm going to yarn over and insert my hook right underneath that loop right there. There we go. So you can see on this side, we still have the top 2 loops of that stitch pushed to the back. Then we go ahead and finish our half double crochet. We pull up a loop and yarn over and pull through all 3. Then we're going to continue all the way across just like this. Yarn over, find that loop, that horizontal loop right beneath the top 2 loops there on the front of the work, and put a half double crochet in each one of those stitches. That's going to push those top 2 loops of the stitch forward, which once we fold this cuff over, it will create a really beautiful effect. So now I'm ready to finish up row 8, but of course, as I forgot to mention, we want to make sure to put a single crochet in that last stitch to match the single crochet we put in our first stitch. So you can see now, if I turn my cuff over, we get a really neat effect of the lines that are pushed forward. But we've got one more round here for our outer cuff, or rather one more row, row 9. To make row 9, we're going to start again with a chain 1 and turn and single crochet in that very first stitch. And you could move your stitch marker up there, but we're done with it now, so I'll just go ahead and set it aside. And then we're going to be working this row in the back loop only in single crochet until 1 stitch remains, and then we'll go back to a regular single crochet. So now we need to take another look, because from this angle it could look like these are the top 2 loops. But really, those are the top 2 loops of our stitch. So now we want to work in just the back loop only. So we want to make sure to turn our work so that we're looking at the top of our row and we can catch just that back loop for a single crochet in each stitch across. So it really does help to turn your work up here. Otherwise, there's a good chance you'll accidentally be working in that front loop only. It's just a little effect from the previous stitches we made, but it's going to give the outside of our cuff a really great textured look here, as you can see. So I've finished row 9 with a single crochet under both of those loops of the last stitch, and we can go ahead and break our yarn. Now I'm not going to be using this yarn for sewing anything, so we can just go ahead and weave that in when we're done. And I'll go ahead and get that stitch marker out of the way as well. And you can see when we fold over our cuff, we get a really lovely textured look. And that split, by not joining in the back, allows just a little bit of that ribbing in the back of the heel to peek through. So before we add our decorative strap, which is optional, we have one more thing we do need to do, and that is sew up that heel. So to sew the heel closed, you could take a row of slip stitches with your hook if you wanted to, but I prefer to sew it closed with the mattress stitch. So I cut an extra length of yarn, maybe 18 inches or so, and put it on a yarn needle. Then it doesn't really matter if we work from the top down or from the bottom up, but I prefer to start at the top because it's a little bit easier. We still have those stitches marked for us, makes it very convenient. So what I want to do is to work the mattress stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and bring my yarn needle from behind through the stitch. I'm just going to pick the one on my left. Now, I need to leave some tail hanging in there, so I'm just going to shove that into my slipper out of the way. Make sure I don't pull it through all the way and get that stitch marker out of the way. Now I can come over to the other side and again come from behind under both of those loops with my yarn needle, and I'll get this stitch marker out of the way as well. There we go. Now I just gently pull that on through. Now what we're going to do is work our way back and forth up this seam coming from underneath or from the inside of our slipper. So I go to the next stitch on the left and then the next stitch on the right. Next stitch on the left, next stitch on the right. So you can see this is a pretty loose seam, but that's the fun of the mattress stitch. Every few stitches, we just give it a nice tug and everything comes right together. Then we go right back to stitching. To the left, to the right, to the left, and to the right. If somehow you get to the bottom here and you've got just one stitch, you don't have one to pair it to, just go ahead and sew it up to the other two stitches, the last two stitches before it. We just want to make sure the back of our heel is closed. But coming from underneath like this and working in pairs for the mattress stitch gives you a really nice invisible seam. You just need to remember to tighten it up every few stitches. So you can see we're right down here to the end. Let's see what we end up with. We've got one on that side and one on that side. And down here, it looks like I did end up with 3 stitches. So we'll just go ahead and do the left and then the right. And then I'll go ahead and maybe catch that end one, or you can just leave it. It's not going to cause any issues. And then I'll send my yarn right to the inside of the slipper. Like so. There, grab it. There we go. And then I can just weave in my ends and our heel is all sewn up. So the only thing left that you can do to your slippers is embellish them. And of course, you can do that in any way you like. The way I chose to do it was adding this really fun little strap and button. They're purely decorative. They don't do any function other than telling me which one's right and which one's left. You can see this one would be on the left. So to make this strap, I just worked 2 rows of single crochet, 12 stitches, and then wrapped it around and sewed it on. And then I used a little bit more of that yarn to sew on this really cute button that I found. You can dress up your slippers in any way you like or leave them plain. It's completely up to you. And that's how to crochet the split cuff slippers. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.